7a. And so the Mishnah talked about using either only the min of the daled minim in order to tie up the lulav, or you could use anything. So Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion it has to be b'minoi, to use something from the lulavs. Rabbi Meir says even a chut, even a mashicha, even which means even a small string or a big string, any of those could be used. Anything could be used to tie it. And the understanding is that Reb Meir doesn't hold that you need to tie it. It's only like a bonus. So whatever you tie it with is not really part of the mitzvah. It's just like an extra bonus, and it won't be an isser of Bal Tosef, of adding on to the mitzvahs. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that this is part of the mitzvah. If you take a different species, that would mean that you're adding another species into the mitzvahs, and that would make it that um, it's not the amount that the Torah said you're adding on. And so that's the argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. And the Mishnah ends off with Rabbi Meir saying that there's a story, people of Yerushalayim, they would use gold to tie it. So it sounds like this opinion of yours, Rabbi Yehuda, is not the accepted, is not the commonly accepted way of doing it. People of Yerushalayim, they would be oiked, they would tie their lulav with golden chains, with golden strands, and golden hooks. So the rabbis told Reb Meir back, and they said, actually, that's not exactly the whole story. They would also tie it milmata, below, with a type of something bimina, with one of the species. They would tie it with, and above it would be tied with gold. That would be lanoi, for beauty. And as we explained, that because their additional tying they specifically had in mind for a different reason, that made it permissible, that it's not considered bal tosef. The fact that their specific intent is not for the mitzvah. In other words, it's not that they don't have any intent for the mitzvah. It's not they have intent not for the mitzvah. They're intending that this is not to fulfill a mitzvah of tying it. Tying it, we tied it already. We tied it with biminoi. Now we're just beautifying the daled minim. We're beautifying it by using a gold hook, a gold strand. And so we're doing that. We're specifically having in mind not for the mitzvah, so that makes it that it's not a problem of Baal Tosef. It's almost like if you were to, if a person were to have in mind that not only is the hand tefillin and the head tefillin part of the tefillin, but a person has in mind my hat, that's also tefillin. I'm doing 3 tefillins today. Person says he's doing his hand, his arm tefillin, his head tefillin, and he's also doing on his hat. He's considering that also a tefillin, doing it l'shem mitzvah. That's Bal Tosef. He's now added on to the mitzvahs. The mitzvah says you're supposed to have the shel yad shel roish, and he's adding on that his hat is also tefillin. That would be a mitzvah. You're having a mind for intent that it's to do a mitzvah. Now, otherwise, if you don't have it in mind, obviously your intent is not that. That's not the normal. It's normal to have a hat on your head, but if someone were to have it in mind that he's doing it for the mitzvah, that would be a Bal Tosef problem. So here also, you're holding the lulav and esrei. You're adding on this strand of gold, but you're specifically having in mind the opposite. So that allows it not to be considered Bal Tosef. It doesn't belong. The golden thing doesn't belong there anyway. But you're specifically having in mind for the opposite. That makes it that's not Bal Tosef. Okay, and then the Gemara said And this was the real topic of yesterday's Gemara was this law that Rava says when it says you have to use something from the from the min, from the type of the species of the daled minim. So Rava says it doesn't mean the actual item that you're using. It means sieve and ikar the dikla. It means parts of the palm tree, of the date palm, that not the parts that you use for the lulav. Other parts, they're also considered bemin. They're also part of the min of the tree, and that's what we're talking about. They might not look exactly like the lulav, um, but as long as it's from the min, it's going to be kosher, and that is what Rava says. And I guess because in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't exactly explain what bimina is, so Rava comes along and he explains that this is all called min. It's all part of the min of the lulav. Now,
Question, Rabbi.
yeah.
Can you use the skin of the etrog as something to bind with?
Mm. So the question about the esrog is a topic of discussion here in the commentaries because um, because the esrog has a different issue. The esrog is a davar hamakabel tuma, and something that's makabel tuma is is invalid. So when it says the Gemara says the Gemara brings the Kal V'chomer Ma'lulav she'ena noyeg. Well, the Gemara says um, Sukkah shenehegas b'leilos ena din shloit tehi ela ba'arba minim, should be ba'arba minim, that the sukkah would need to be ba'arba minim. So the question would be, would you be allowed to use an esrog for schach? You can't. Now the problem is schach. That's really where the issue is. You're asking about using the esrog for its bemin. So could you use it for to tie the lulav together? I mean, I guess you could. I don't know. It's beminoi, but when you compare it to schach, that becomes a little problematic because then this is where the commentaries struggle, and this is because could you really use an esrog for schach? An esrog is not eligible for schach. It's not the pseilas dagon v'yakav, according to Rabbi Yehuda. It also has the rules of that it can't be something that's what you call it, the makabel tuma. And so what would the case be that the esrog would be acceptable? So could be maybe it's talking about the wood from the esrog. It could be it's talking about a small esrog that's not kosher for the mitzvah, and it's inedible. So something like that would maybe be that it's not makabel tuma. Maybe in such a case, less than a kazai. Oh, there's a machloikis. That's true. It's really a machloikis. If less than a kazayis, everyone holds you can't. It can't cause something else to be tummy. Something that's too small, less than a kazayis. The fruit that's less than a kazayas is not going to be metame something else, or less than a kabetza, less than the size of an egg. It's less than the size of an egg. It can't be metame something else. But can it itself become tame is subject to an argument between the Rishonim. And so it's possible that you can learn the Gemara here that it means that you could use the esrog to for schach, because if it's less than the size of a kabetza of an egg, it would be not kabel to him. It doesn't even receive to him, according to one view, according to one way of looking at it. So according to that view, that could be the meaning the esrog being kosher for schach. If it's less than the size of a kibetza, then it can't be makabel tuma. Others argue and say it is makabel tuma. It can receive tuma if it's that small. It just can't give tuma to something else. So therefore, that wouldn't be a good answer. So you need to answer maybe that's talking about the wood from the esrog tree. But anyway, bottom line is, yeah, it would seem to me like you could use for the egged. I mean, you could use the esrog itself. If you could somehow peel it and make a strong string out of it. I guess, yeah, I guess it should be acceptable. Do you have a reason not to, Ezra? Do you?
No, I'm just asking a question as to,
Yeah, I
we
guess
normally
that would be,
use.
yeah, I guess it would be fine then. The issue really is the other way, is about the sukkah, where the Gemara talks about that the sukkah is learned from there, from that could you use it for schach? That would be an issue, using such material for schach if it's makabel tuma, susceptible to impurity, then that could be problematic. Again, unless you hold that it's less than X size, because kabetza and things like that. So maybe you could even use it for schach. Okay. The the Gemara then said the Gemara said that so it mentioned Rava's qualified explanation of Rabbi Yehuda. And the Gemara says, "My time of the Rabbi Yehuda." What's the reason of Rabbi Yehuda? The Gemara says because lulav tarach eged. So if you have something else, it's chamisha minim. The Gemara doesn't exactly spell it out, but what the Gemara is basically getting at is you bring another min, as Rashi says, you're going to be over bal toisif. You know, the problem is you're adding to mitzvahs. So people. People wonder, why is there such a problem of adding to mitzvahs? Subtracting is the big problem, right? You do less. Torah says do this, you do less. That's a problem. What's so bad about adding to mitzvahs? So the thing is, once you add kol hamoisef geireya, once you say that the Torah is not so exact, then you're minimizing the importance, the intensity of the meaning of the laws of the Torah. And so if you can add a law, then you could subtract as well. So there's a little understanding of what's so bad about being moisif, adding on. It's you have to understand also that it's Hashem's commands, not up to it's not person adding on. These are mitzvahs from the Eibishter, mixing into to Hashem's area. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, don't we find elsewhere that when it comes to like gold, that even though one might think that one's beautifying the mitzvah by using gold rather than what's intended, it's not valid. For instance, like if one were to make the batim of tefillin out of gold.
Yeah. What does it say there? I remember it mentioned something. What does it say about making the bottom out of gold? You remember is it a Gemara? I think it's a Gemara somewhere. Maybe Menachos, I don't know. It's a Gemara somewhere about making the bottom out of gold. We have to search the internet. But yeah, it does talk about right. But here again, the opinion about the gold is uh, is where they're doing like additional, they're just beautifying it. Again, it's not the mitzvah. The tefillin case is where you're making the bottom out of gold. That's the actual mitzvah. Yeah, that's a serious problem here, as the Mishnah explained at the end. See in the Brisa, but the Mishnah explained at the end that they already had the eged, the mitzvah. This was like on top of it. It's almost like making your in shul, you see people with different covers for their tefillin. If you want to make a cover out of gold, I don't think that's a problem. You can, make the box, the outer box, the tefillin if you want to make the packaging box out of gold. Yeah, people have different colors, silver ones and and black ones and black and gold ones. So the plastic box that covers the tefillin. So that that would be similar to this, where you're tying the lulav with gold besides the original tie that's already tied. You're tying another tie of gold. That's not the mitzvah. Okay, so the Gemara says that that's the problem according to Rabbi Yehuda, that he holds you need an eged. Then the Gemara says, yes.
Yeah, as far as adding mitzvahs,
Yeah.
this is what happened with Adam and Chava. Hashem
Right.
said, "Don't eat it," and he said, "Don't eat it and don't touch it."
Yeah.
And when they saw that they touched it, and nothing happened, then they got into trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So then the Gemara mentions that Rava says, "How do I know what I told you about the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, that these other parts of the lulav tree are also called the min of the lulav, and you could use them to bind the lulav with the hadassim and aravis. How do I know that? Again, that that's not so clear from the wording of Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah. All he says is b'minoi. I would think you have to use the actual the way we commonly do it. We actually use a lulav, not the sieve, not the not the ikra the dikla. So the Gemara says that Gemara brings a lengthy proof, really. So first it brings a brisa, sugas teishva, and you learn from there that schach is anything. And that's Rabbi Meir's view. Huda says it has to be from the Arba Minim, and he learns it from a Kal V'chomer. What's a Kal V'chomer? Kal V'chomer, this is an interesting Kal V'chomer. I must say it doesn't seem so convincing, but he breaks a Kal V'chomer by saying that if lulav only is a law by day and not by night, and sukkah is a law by night and by day, that means sukkah is much more strict. And if the law of lulav is to shake only the daled minim, then sukkah, which is more strict, it's even by night and by day, for sure it should need only the daled minim. Right? If sukkah is more strict than lulav, and lulav needs daled minim, so sukkah for sure should need the daled minim and not anything else. It's only kosher with the daled minim. It seems like an interesting Kal V'chomer, it doesn't seem as convincing as some of the other Kal V'chomers, in that we find. I'm not exactly sure how to pinpoint what's wrong. It just doesn't seem. It seems like something's missing there. So the law of lulav is with the daled minim. The law of sukkah, you can't have it that the sukkah is talking about something else, talking about the Psoilas Ger and V'Yakev. This is with daled minim. This is with the other thing with Psoilas. If that needs daled minim, this for sure needs to be limited to daled minim. Definitely an interesting Kal V'chomer. Now, I would have liked to. Yeah, it seems a little. It definitely seems problematic. I don't really. I can't really say I understand it. But definitely seems the rabbis argue with him, of course. But what's their answer to him? So it seems that they're giving a few points. Number one, they say that this is not a very this type of Kal V'chomer is not eligible to be counted because it does have a leniency to it in the end. So you can't make a Kal V'chomer, and Rashi spells it out very nicely over here, the way the rabbis disprove it different than I would have thought. I would have thought that the rabbis would disprove it, that it's not in the first place, it's not really a good kal v'chomer, but they disprove it because of a technical problem that ultimately messes up the kal v'chomer. And Rashi spells it out. I'd like to read the Rashi, the bottom Rashi. He spells out the concept of kal v'chomer very nicely, and he explains why it's not going to work. Once you understand what he says, it ends up that you can understand the answer much better. So on 36b, the bottom Rashi, Amru Lai, they said to him, Kol din kal v'chomer she'ata dan shetchilase lahachmer v'soifa lahakel einay din. All types of logical kal v'chomers that you want to judge, that they start off being a chumrah, like for example here, that it would need to be only from the 4 species that you would need to use for schach, it would be a chumrah, very strict rule, that it has to be from the daled minim, has to be from the 4 species in order for it to be kosher. But it's going to end up being a kula, lahakil. It'll end up being problematic because what happens if a person they don't have any more of those daled minim? You're going to end up not sitting in the sukkah, so it's going to end up being a kula. Then einay din, that's not a good kal v'chomer. It's not a good kal v'chomer. What's the reason? So Rashi gives us a little understanding of what this. It's all based on logic. The kal v'chomer is a logical thing. In fact, we once saw earlier in Sukkah that kal v'chomer is one area where anyone can make their own kal v'chomers. Like, you don't need to have a tradition on a kal v'chomer. Everyone agrees that a kal v'chomer that can simply be made. Kal v'chomer is this a priori argument. So Rashi says kal v'chomer shata maschel lidrosh, the kal v'chomer that you start to expound on al yedei chomer sheyeshbei, because of some stringency that you have, lahavi loy chomer acher, and say, well, if it's strict here, it's more strict than that other case, and that other case is limited to this, then therefore here also we should say that that strictness there applies here as well. There you need to have the daled minim by lulav. Here, sukkah, where it's even more strict because the law of sukkah applies even at night, for sure, we got to take that stringency there and bring it here, lahavi loy chomer acher b'kal v'chomer, to make this other chumrah, this other strictness, through a kal v'chomer min hakal, from the easier case, the case of lulav. That lulav is much easier; it's only by day, and still it needs daled minim. So let's take the chumrah there that applies, that says that it needs to have only daled minim. Let's apply it to sukkah, which is even more strict because sukkah is even by night and by day. It's both. So for sure here, we got to take that strictness. So this type of case where you're using that strict, that you're taking the strict chumrah over from there, the strict rule from there, and bringing it here because you're taking it from the easier case to the strong case. But in the end, it's going to end up being a leniency. With this strict thing that you brought, it's going to end up turning over to be lenient. This is not a proper kal v'chomer. The law, the logic teaches to be strict, but you're making it lenient. So these last 5 lines, 5 words, he sort of like answers he explains why you can't say such a kal v'chomer. The logic behind the kal v'chomer is that you're making something strict because this is more strict anyway. It's got to be as strict as the other case, but that's not true in certain scenarios. Which scenarios? In cases where that strictness is going to come to a leniency, so then it can't be a good kal v'chomer because you're actually making it lenient. You're not making it strict. You're making it lenient. Why? Because what you're saying is if there is no more daled minim to use for schach, then you don't have to do sukkah. Then you're not going to end up doing your sukkah. So you're going to lead to a leniency. The way Rashi's understanding it is, it's a kal v'chomer that you're supposed to be teaching a strict law, and you're ending up teaching a leniency. So That's the logic that he's saying, and that's what the Gemara is saying over here. That the rabbis argued on Rabbi Yehuda that this won't work. Now, in addition to what they said about this, that if you don't have a lulav, the daled minim to use for schach, then you're going to be messed up with your sukkah. And now our Gemara says that loy matzah arbas minim, you don't find the daled minim, you're going to be stuck. The simple way of learning our Gemara is that you need at least one of the daled minim to use for schach, according to Rabbi Yehuda. But if you look at the top Rashi is very interesting here. He says, "Lo motza echad midaled minim halalu yehi yoshev ubatel." If you don't find one of the daled minim, then you can't do sukkah, which makes it sound like you might need all four, according to this Kavach Chaymer. Lulav, you need all four to be yaitza the mitzvah of lulav. So the way the Rashi adds the word echad. If you look at the top Rashi on 37a, very interesting how the Gemara doesn't have that word in it. Rashi seems to have that word or includes that word, that it says the word echad. Loy matzah echad midaled minim, not loy matzah daled minim. Loy matzah echad midaled minim. If you missed out in one of the daled minim, then you're going to not fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah. Well, the truth is, I guess it's not necessarily. I guess you could learn it the opposite way. Like matzah, as long as you found one, I guess you could learn it that way. As long as you found one of the daled minim, and the way our Gemara is, I don't know if it's such a diuk. I guess you could learn maybe from Rashi the other way. That loy matzah, as long as you found one, if you didn't find one of the daled minim, yoshev ubatel. From our Gemara, you could also learn, I guess, the same way. Loy matzah arbas minim. If you didn't find the daled, you need all four, maybe. I guess you could learn both ways. I guess I take that back about the diuk and Rashi. It's not exactly. It's not necessarily so. You could learn both ways. You could learn either way. You could learn in the Gemara or Rashi. Rashi does have a different word. He says the word echad, but I don't know if it's meduyak either way. The question would be, do you need to, according to Rabbi Yehuda, do you need all four species? Just like you need for lulav, you need all four species. So would you need all four species for your schach, according to him? Or is it any one of them is good enough? Just like the daled minim, you have four species. So as long as you use any of them, that would be kosher. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, it's a little unclear what Rabbi Yehuda's shita would be. Would you need all of them or not? Okay. Anyway, so the Gemara continues and says that the Torah says Basuka is Teshvu, and so that was one point that the rabbis I'm sorry. It was the first point that the Kavach Chaymer is a problem because it leads to a leniency. Then comes the next point that it says Basukas Teshvu. And what do we see from there? That it's a Sukkah shall call davar. So we have a diuk, a hint in the pasuk that it really is not. It has a plural basukais, and the plural of basukais could mean anything called davar, not just the daled minim. And so that would seemingly be another proof that the Torah doesn't mean that it has to be the Daled Minim. You have the Torah says that plural, that it means anything. You can be besachach with anything. Now, then the third thing it says that in Sefer Ezra, we have that it says over there, bring Ali Zayis, Eitz Shemen, Ali Hadas. And this, of course, is this, of course, is another proof that why is he telling them that he wants them to make sukkahs? He's telling them to bring different types of wood, leaves, and basically these are not all the daled minim. You have ale zayis, olives. You have ale sheben. These are a parsimony. Oh, yesterday Ezra was texted, chat, put something in the chat. Ezra, are you there? I don't know what you looked up. What a parsimony? He looked it up. I mean, we translated it as maybe persimmon oil, but I think he looked up something else. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe when Ezra comes back. Now, so the oh, there you are, Ezra. You put something yesterday in the chat about a parsimony.
Yeah.
What did you put? Because I didn't see it.
Okay, so the definition that they give for a farsimon is it's either persimmon or balsam.
A balsam. Oh yeah, that's what I've heard before. Balsam, right? Thank you. Okay, yeah. So that's what the ale the shemen, ale eats shemen. What is this shemen? What oil are we referring to? If it already said ale zayis, normally oil in the Torah is normally olive oil. But if it already said ali zayas, that's referring to the olive tree as a zayas. Then when it says eitz shemen, the ali eitz shemen, it must be a different tree. So it must be this parsimony oil. Parsimony oil was used in but similar to olive oil in certain ritual purposes, like when they anointed a king, but not from the Malchus-based David. So they would use this parsimony oil. They would use it was almost like a substitute for the olive oil. So it is either persimmon or balsam oil. So that's the tree actually. So it's either the persimmon tree or the balsam tree. So and then you have the ale hadas. And yesterday I mentioned that this means a hadas shoita, because it also mentions the ale eitz avos. And ale eitz avos is, of course, the hadas that's kosher. So
is this in the Gemara, the parsimon?
Well, no, it uses the word shemen, eitz shemen. The problem is that it seems redundant because it already said ale zayis. So why would it say ale eitz shemen? So eitz shemen, what leaves of an oil tree? What's the oil tree? In the Torah, the oil tree should be olive oil, but it already said olive leaves. So what does it mean? This leaves of an oil tree. So that's the understanding. Okay, so then
in my translation, it says, "Go forth to the mountain and fetch olive branches and pine branches."
Aha, so they're translating it as pine. That's interesting. The understanding is based on a Gemara Rosh Hashanah. To look it up over there, that it's a parsimony. Somewhere in the Gemara Rosh Hashanah.
Because pine is a very strong smell.
Unless that's how they're translating a parsimony, maybe that's another opinion of what a parsimony means. Maybe parsimony could mean pine. I don't know why they would translate it that way. We'd have to look it up in the Gemara Rosh Hashanah where it talks about this, mentions if it's what it's referring to. This, in other words, we'd have to look up. It brings this pasuk there, and so we could take a look in Rosh Hashanah. see it. It's page 23. Okay, so the Gemara says that you have all these types of the pasuk in Ezra calls it. It's interesting because really it's in Nehemiah, but the pasuk calls it Ezra. The Gemara says that Nehemiah lost out in having a sefer called by his name. So his sefer is like connected to. We always call it Ezra, Sefer Ezra. Even though in today's day and age, it seems like we've given it a name, Nehemiah, but the official name is part of Sefer Ezra. And there was some time that Ezra took too much covered. The Gemara talks about a sin that he did that because of that his name wasn't called by his name. Something, some type of saying that he said that sounded arrogant. So ultimately, he lost the name on the Sefer. So the Chida writes that nowadays we call it Nehemiah. So he says it seems like maybe he had atonement already from the sin, and therefore in today's day and age we do call it Nehemiah. But the Gemara calls it Ezra, the book of Ezra, and it brings this pasuk. Again, it's in Nehemiah, and it says that to go out to the mountain and bring these type of leaves, and basically to build your sukkah. And this is where they're announcing everyone to build their sukkahs. And basically, this was one of the like in those days, this was like the Kiruv Rechokim. This was the Mivtza Sukkah that they did then because people were not so involved in mitzvahs. Many people were intermarried. They went up to Eretz Yisrael, and they were getting people, to divorce their goyish wives and so on, and start reconnecting. So he was getting them to build sukkahs, and so he tells them about gathering these type of items. Now, so the thing is that this is seems like a third proof against Reb Yehuda that you see that it's allowed to have even olive branches or leaves for the schach. This is the proof. You got another proof. Now, the Gemara says, Reb Yehuda Savarhani L'Defanos. Yehuda says these things that are not kosher for schach, they're really for defanos. They're not from the Daled Minim, they're for the walls of the sukkah. But for the schach, you have a kavachomer. You need to have the Daled Minim. The Ali Hadas, Ali Tzmam, Ali Yitzavos, that's kosher for the schach. Now, the Gemara says that Tanan, and then Rava continues with his trying. So we didn't prove yet the final proof that Reb Yehuda holds you need Daled Minim, but you could use different types of stuff that was part of the Daled Minim. It doesn't have to be the kosher part of the Daled Minim. It could be anything from the Daled Minim. And so it says, Utnan, that we learned in a Mishnah that you could use Nasarim. These are some type of board that was wide boards. It seems similar to a house. And Rabbi Yehuda says you're allowed to use them. And they're wide boards. And you have to say that these boards are from the Daled Minim. Now, they can't be such boards you can't have from the lulav. How do you have a lulav with boards? They can't be a lulav boards. Lulav is very the leaves are minimal. You're not going to have a board, so it must be from the actual tree. So we see from here that it must be siv and ikra the dikla. These are all part of the tree. It comes from the tree. You could use it for schach. And if so, then you could use it for, it's called the min of the tree. And if it's the min of the tree, it could be used for schach. It could be used for tying, for binding. So the Gemara says, yeah, shma mina, we see from here. So it must be considered that it's part of the tree. And so it could be used as well for the tying of the lulav together with the hadassim and the aravis. Now the Gemara says, does Rabbi Yehuda really say this thing? We have a sikha ben asarim shel erez. There is a brisa that talks about using the sarim shel erez. So here the Gemara struggles because it actually spells out erez. Erez means cedar. So he clearly says that you could use cedar wood for your schach. He talks about a cedar wood that's, if it's daled tvachim, if it's wide, four hand breadths, everyone agrees it's invalid. If it doesn't have four hand breadths, Meir says it's invalid. Rabbi Yehuda says it's kosher. Because it's Meir says invalid because it is 3 hand breadths, but it's not 4. So Rabbi Yehuda says that's good enough. What do you mean? It's erez. This is like seems to contradict Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara says that the answer is that erez could mean a hadas, and because we have a pasuk that says saramini arozim hein etin b'midbar erez shita hadas. So somehow this would be a way of understanding erez, that you could use hadas could be considered an erez, and what ends up in this scenario would be that that's what he was talking about, and it would be considered this type of a board made out of these hadassim. So the understanding I have, and I'm a little surprised that the Gemara seems to be saying that a hadas could be very thick. It just seems surprising, practically. It doesn't sound from the Gemara like it's permitting any erez because it's called a hadas. It says a hadas called an erez. Not that every erez, every cedar tree. Now, let me mute everyone here. Mute the sound. Does this Gemara mean that every time you have every cedar tree is, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're allowed to use all cedar trees for schach, according to Rabbi Yehuda, or does he mean to say that hadas is part of the cedar family? And if someone were to sell cedar tree, they could give a hadas bush or something. But not that, would it be kosher to use a cedar? Because, see, if the Gemara said, my hadas, that erez, that hadas min erez or something, and kol arozim are included, all erez. The Gemara doesn't spell it out that every erez is included in this. Would you be allowed to use any type of erez according to Rabbi Yehuda because it's part of that family? Is that what the Gemara means? David, does the Steinsaltz permit all arozim, all type of erez according to Rabbi Yehuda? Does it say not the halacha can't be that it follows Rabbi Yehuda here, but I'm just wondering how they explain the answer of the Gemara that erez means hadas. Does that mean that all types of cedar woods is going to be permissible according to, because once one type of erez, one species of cedar is kosher, which is called the hadas, does that mean all the species would be kosher for schach?
My tablet just went out of battery. That has the
just when we need it.
I'm looking at everything else on the phone.
Oh, right. Anyway, it just seems surprising to me. If you're going to translate it to mean hadas, could you have a hadas? Is it possible to have like a nasarim boards from a hadas tree? I mean, a hadas is a bush, is it right? It's not a tree. The hadassim the myrtles grow on a tree? Is it really like a tree, or is it more of a bush? I mean, I guess I'm thinking of iravis. They're bushes, but is there a wooden trunk to a myrtle tree? What is a we could look up on Google maybe. What does a myrtle tree look like? Myrtle tree. Myrtle tree images. Oh, it does have. Huh, maybe they do have. Does have a long stem. It seems like maybe it is. Huh. I guess it has wood. I guess that's all the Gemara means, right? I guess it does have a wooden middle that you could have a board maybe out of it. So when it says Erez, it means the hadas. Okay? That's what it's referring to. Yeah, I guess that's how you translate it. I'm thinking of ravais of the willows. Willows don't really have a trunk, but it's a bush. But I guess the myrtle is more of a tree. I guess we don't really grow any myrtles here. We got them all from Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so that must be that's the answer of the Gemara, and I guess it could grow much bigger and make have a board that's 4 handbreadths wide, and that's what it's referring to. Okay, now the Gemara then says that Gemara then says the Gemara then says that Meir talks about the tying the lulav, and he says you don't need it to be it doesn't need to be from the daled minim. It could be anything you could use. Okay, we're going to start here again on page 37a, and we are holding by Reb Meir Omer. It's really right in the middle of the page. See, it's about 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe about 22, 23 lines from the top of the page on 37a. 37a. So Reb Meir says, even b'mashicha, even a string. Tanya, it was taught in a brisa. Amar Reb Meir says, Maisa b'Akira Yerushalayim, a story about the wealthy, the upper class, the Yakirim of Yerushalayim, and the special ones of Yerushalayim, the honorable ones, the Nechbedei Yerushalayim ho Ashirim, Rashi says. So those that are the dignitaries of Yerushalayim that were wealthy. They would tie their lulav with strands of gold. And so that's the story. Reb Meir wants to prove, of course, to Reb Yehuda that you're allowed to use non-daled minim species to tie your lulav. And he brings a proof from a story from the Yakira Yerushalayim, these wealthy ones. Now, don't forget, if you look at our Mishnah sort of said the story already. It does say, Maisa ba'anshi Yerushalayim. There was a story with the people of Yerushalayim. So it's not such a new, this story is not that new to us. We did see the story in the Mishnah. So the Brisa says this story, that Reb Meir, of course, is using this as a proof that you can use these type of gold strands for to tie your lulav. Amru loy misham raya. So the rabbis told to Reb Meir, okay, you bring a proof against Reb Yehuda with the story. You misham raya. B'minoi hayoydanayse milmato. They would tie it. B'minoi. They would tie it with its min. In its with its daled minim, they would tie it below. So on top, they would also put the gold. Again, we saw this story. What's the Gemara bringing the story for? We already saw the story in the Mishnah. So the commentary struggled to understand, why is the Gemara bring a brisa? The Gemara doesn't bring a brisa for no reason. It normally brings a brisa if it adds something. What's it adding here? Do you see any difference between this story and the Mishnah? Anyone see any difference? So there's two differences really. One is that it mentions the wealthy ones, the Akira Yushalayim. There it just said Anshe Yushalayim. Another difference is that the Misham Raya, that it says from there is a proof, which normally is as a like a question mark, Misham Raya. But there is another way to learn this Gemara, and it answers that question. That is that Misham Raya is not a question; it's a statement that the rabbis told Rameir. From there, it's a proof the opposite. And what they were saying was, these are wealthy people. The wealthy people, they had money to buy gold and use gold for the string around the lulav. They had money. And yet, they would use the daled minim, to wrap it below. Yeah, they would use gold on top, of course. They had gold. They would have used more gold. But they specifically wrapped it b'minoi with the daled minim. Why did they do that? They were yakire. They were wealthy ones, the dignitaries of Yerushalayim that had a lot of money, and they should have just used gold in the whole thing. So the mayor says they were wealthy. Rameir says this is the story about the wealthy ones. They were with the gold, and he wants to prove. You see, it's acceptable. And the rabbis told him back, Misham Raya. From there, it's a proof that they didn't. That it's not acceptable because because they actually would tie it below. From there, it's actually a proof exactly the opposite, because they would tie it below with the daled minim, with part of the species of the daled minim. And even though they were wealthy, that's what they would use. It must be that the mitzvah is to use the daled minim, the type of from the daled minim, to tie the lulav together. So that's the other way of reading it. Then it explains why the Gemara brings it. It's showing that it's bringing more of a proof. Here brings a proof the opposite way. The Mishnah didn't say either way. Here it makes it more like a proof. You see from there that obviously this was done purposely, that you need to use the daled minim to tie it. Amalu Rabba. Rabba said to the Amalu Rabba Lahanhu Megadle Hoshana Devei Reish Kalusa. He said to the people who would tie the Hoshana. Again, we've seen this term before. Hoshana does not mean Hoshanos. Hoshana means the lulav with the esrog and the lulav with the hadassim and aravis. That they would call that the Hoshana. And they would be the people who would be megadelit. They would Gidol means to braid. They would braid it, but it means that they would be the ones who would tie it in the house of the Reish Kalus of the exilarch. So Rabbah told those people, he got lisu Hoshana, when you tie the lulav with the hadassim and aravis, the Reish Kalusa in the house of the exilarch, Shairu Bay Beis Yad, you should leave on the bottom an area that doesn't have any bind, and people will be able to hold it there without a chatzitza. In order that there shouldn't be a separation between one's hand and the lulav. What was the reason? Why did Rabbah tell them to do this? Because Rabbah holds you don't need to tie it. And the tie is just extra. And the tie would be not from the min. The tie is extra. And if you're holding it with the wraparound, this thing that you wrapped around it, so you're not actually holding the lulav and esrog, you're holding the wraparound. That's called a chatzitza. That's a separation, and therefore you want to specifically hold it lower than it, and it won't be a chatzitza. You won't have a problem of a separation. Now Rashi over here says that it shouldn't be a chatzitza between your hand and the Hoshana, and then it's not called a lekicha. It's not called taking. You're supposed to take it. This is not called taking. Now, what would happen if you use the min of the lulav? Would that be a problem? What happens if you wrapped it with the actual lulav, you know, with the lulav branch, with the lulav leaf? So would that be a problem? So Tosfos over here says that Rabbah holds min b'minoi is chaytzitz. Even if it's from the same min, even if it's from the same species, it's a problem. So again, Rabbah was telling the people who were tying the lulav, make sure to leave a space on the bottom in order you be able to hold it, because it could be that even if it's from the same min, for sure, if it's from a different min, it's a problem of chatzitza. But even if it's from the same min, it's a problem. So you want to be machmer. This is really a source where you got to always be careful. Whenever you take on a chumrah, you got to make sure that you're not causing there to be a leniency. We saw that again on this page of Gemara. It seems like it's repeating itself, because here you're tying it. Do you need to tie the lulav with the hadassim and the ravis? No, we don't hold that. You need to tie it. Oh, you're going to tie it? Make sure that then you got to be extra careful. You're tying it. You might even be a chatzitza. You might even ruin it. So you got to be careful when you're adding. In other words, how delicate it is that when you're doing something extra, you got to be extra careful that it's not going to cause any. You're not going to detract from the actual mitzvah, because even if it's the min, but we hold you don't need it. So then according to Rabbah, it's min b'mina is chaytzitz. Tosfos has another interpretation here, but that's a simple understanding that he's saying even if you're using the same min, make sure to leave a space. Now, Rava says, he says, Rava says it's not a problem. And you don't have to worry. You're doing it for beauty. And it's l'tzairich mitzvah. It's for the mitzvah. It's not going to be an issue. And okay, we're going to stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.